are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to Popcorn Theology, where we examine films and shows for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I'm David.
And I'm Jam.
And we are continuing our weekly minisodes on The Last of Us Season 2 with Episode 4, Day 1. So 241. Anyway, as always, these are going to be chock full of spoilers, so consider this your spoiler warning.
And with that spoiler warning dropped, don't forget to like and to share this episode with your friends. Follow us on social media. You can subscribe to YouTube or wherever you listen. And if you would, consider helping us out by giving us a rating. 5-star rating is preferable, but give us whatever you can with a brief review, and support us on Patreon, where you can interact, you can influence, and even enjoy exclusive bonus content.
That's right. So now we're going to, like I said, review episode 4, which is called Day 1, which didn't throw me off at all.
Well, that's how the game splits it up. Is it does it in day segments. So when they day one did, I knew, at least from a game perspective, like, oh, okay, here we go.
See, I assumed they were going to go back to like the outbreak day in Seattle. That would have been interesting to see.
That makes sense.
But then they didn't at all do that. So I was a bit lost. But what they did do in this episode is Ellie and Dina arrive in Seattle, and they get caught in a brutal war, kind of caught up in this war between the Wolves, that are WLF, and the Scars, or the Seraphites. After a run-in with a horde of infected, Ellie has to reveal to Dina that she is immune, after which Dina confesses her love for Ellie, and they hook up. We'll say it that way. And that's essentially what happens in the episode. So it is time for our popcorn ratings. So, Jam, you said the last couple were buttered and salted, which is our highest ranking.
Yep.
How would you say that this one compares to those? Are you sticking with buttered and salted?
Yeah, not at all. This was stale. This is the lowest. It was a disappointing episode. Honestly, apart from a new character who's played by Jeffrey Wright, apart from that and his origin story and a little bit of torturing of a scar, I was bored. You know, you have the Dina and the Ellie interactions, and those were just awful and boring. Now, I will say their timeline is a little bit off compared to the game. So the whole train tunnel situation that we saw in the episode, I literally just played that part. And I had been playing the game for a significant amount of time before I got to the train station tunnels underground. So they moved that ahead pretty far. And even the way they filmed that and chose to do that was a little bit different than the game. Up to this point, though, man, I'm completely blind because I'm not any further than that part. I thought I had more time, but I'm done now, I guess. But even things
now
like
we're on the same footing. Yeah,
we're on the same footing. Yeah. The episode started out on a high for me, getting to see the fact that Josh from Drake and Josh had in fact survived the zombie apocalypse. But then I was like horribly let down to see him get blown up by a grenade. So, yep, that's it. It was stale for me, man. What about you?
He survived a nuclear test blast in Oppenheimer and got taken out by a hand grenade. This is bad news. This guy.
Yep. It's awful.
I was wondering if that was him. I was like, they can't be him.
That's him. And it's probably childhood nostalgia because I grew up watching Drake and Josh, but I legitimately just want to see him in good roles. Disney had, I don't know if we covered it, but it was, Hooch. Hooch was his name. It was based off of an 80s movie.
Turner and Hooch?
Turner and Hooch. Yes.
The original's amazing. They did
Disney
a remake
Plus
of it?
Did a series. And so Turner and Hooch, it was like his son from the original movie, and he's essentially following in his father's footsteps. It was actually a pretty lighthearted, and entertaining show. My wife and I watched it. I just want to see him do well in something, and
Sure.
he's not really been consistent since Drake and Josh. So I was again disappointed to see him just get blown up. So
I'm curious, did they get Tom Hanks for the Turner and Hooch? Like, did they
No.
do a cameo or anything?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah.
Nope. It was one season, and I think they canceled it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll have to check it out though, because I love the original. It's like both lighthearted and extremely dark.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
excellent. But yeah, I would say so. You're putting this one as stale, which is our lowest level. I'm gonna meet in the middle there, which I would say fresh. I would say it was okay, but not great. Yeah, the opening sequence and impending battle between the wolves and Scars, that was really interesting. I mean, kind of, it's being teased. But the scene with the Horde was awesome. I thought that whole train sequence was really cool, having no context of it from the game.
Yep.
I season 1, the first couple episodes really give you the feeling that there's going to be a lot of infected in this show. And then like several episodes will go by where you don't even see a single one.
Yeah.
And so whenever we get those moments where they just burst through, I always, I always find that pretty cool. But overall, very little happened in this episode. When I went to write up that summary, I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's it.
That's
all right.
it. That's it.
Usually I have to like condense it, but this was not a ton happened.
Yeah.
It mostly focused on the romantic relationship between Ellie and Dina, which, we'll talk more about in a moment. But in terms of rankings, of course, we have Popcorn and then the Theology rankings where we assess the themes. So the last episode we had both said was My Cup Runneth Over, which was, I think, the first time that we had placed an episode in that high of a category.
Yep.
Lots of discussion points there. So even though with this episode we had disappointing popcorn ratings, what were your thoughts on the theological themes? Did they maintain that trend?
No, not at all, actually. It's diluted for me, man. Yeah, on the popcorn side, you're mentioning the zombie fight. That was cool, but it plays out very differently in the game, and I actually enjoy it more in the game. So that might be why I overlooked that part.
Fair enough.
But in terms of the theological themes, man, it's diluted for me. It lacked depth of discussion. Like I struggled to think about something to actually discuss for this episode. It could have been, I just wasn't in a good headspace when I was viewing. I could have just been too tired at this. It was 9:00. That's my bedtime.
Whoa.
Or, it is what it is. Like, it's just an episode that just wasn't a great episode, but watching it, I had many points of rejection that we'll talk about in terms of our receive, reject, and redeem framework. But what about you, man? Did it live up to previous episodes for you?
Oh, absolutely not. No, it was, I would say, also diluted. I mean, and for overall, I don't expect every episode of a show to be My Cup Runneth Over, right? But in this case, it didn't even meet our kind of medium level of carbonated, right? Yeah. It was just kind of at the lower end of discussion points. And so there's a bit we can redeem from it, a bit more we can reject. But yeah, in terms of the main theme, the main thrust of this episode, it just wasn't quite as interesting for popcorn theology discussion, in part because we know we're going to come back to some of this stuff later, right? So we're going to do an episode on the full season. And at that point, we can kind of look back with hindsight and address some of these themes a little bit more. But in terms of standalone themes, this one was, a little bit on the, diluted side, if you will.
Well, I think that's what's been challenging, not in a bad way, but that's what's been challenging about these minisodes is really trying to think through what is one thing that we can latch onto and talk about and still have room within a full-length episode to be able to cover. And I think in particular with this episode, we've hit a little rut where it's like it's really hard not to, especially given the content of the episode, it's hard not to, for lack of a better term, beat a dead horse in a full length. If we were to just talk about what is problematic in this episode, without a doubt, we're going to see more of it. So I think that's part of it. But typically we at Popcorn Theology, we encourage our listeners and we ourselves try to engage in media consumption through what we call the 3 R's, or I was calling it triple R to my friends. And so it'd be receive, reject, and redeem. And we're asking ourselves the questions, what truths or themes can we receive from this film? What things do we need to reject as Christians? And what things are redeemable that perhaps could have played out a little more, or we could think through a little more and redeem those categories? And man, I have two areas, and I'm sure there's more that we could discuss. But I think this is a great episode to introduce this and to be able to hit this. First and foremost, we have to reject the notion of Ellie and Dina's relationship. The scriptures are clear. Christ is even clear on this teaching as well. When he teaches about marriage, he teaches that it is God's intention for sexual relationships to be in the context of marriage, which is between explicitly male and female. And this, it's going to continue. I know it is, because I've played the games, even though I'm in the dark now. I've played the games. I know it's going to continue. And so we'll get into further discussion there. But there's a little caveat in this too, because at one point with Dina, she mentioned she's pregnant. It's right before they hook up, which is just,
that was weird.
It was super weird. She says, I'm pregnant, and then out of nowhere, they're going to hook up. And then after the hookup, Ellie, or it's either after, I think it's after, Ellie says, I'm going to be a dad. We have to reject that notion too. Women cannot be men. They can't be. Biologically, they can't be. Biologically, they can't be. Men can't be women. Biologically, they can't be. But also, in God's good design, which he's created the biological aspects of us as well, he made us male and female, and God does not make mistakes. So we have to reject that notion too. She would not be a dad. She would be a mother, if that was even a thing. Yeah. So we have to reject that.
Maybe that's as close as I think we can get.
Yeah.
To something that makes sense. Yeah.
So that's the reject. There's more we could talk about in rejecting. Yeah. But on more of a positive note, one notion that we could redeem is that one, individuals can make a choice. Individuals can make choices to better themselves through further knowledge. If you think about education, the whole idea of education is a brighter future. That's at least what we're told, a brighter future through learning and being educated. And of course, we see this historically as the case too. We see things like mathematics and science and modern medicine. All of these things are because of a Christian understanding, historically speaking, because of a Christian understanding that God has made all things, that all things work together in an orderly fashion because we live in an orderly universe with a creative design. And all of these things, they further prove a creator. So good science always proves a good creator. Mathematics is a language in itself that only works not because of chance and happenstance. It actually couldn't work because of chance and happenstance. Mathematics only works because we have a creative designer that created that language to work in the way that it does. And so that's one thing we can redeem from this. Jeremy writes, character Isaac, he essentially gives this whole, it's not even a speech, it's a couple lines in the very beginning of this episode about this one random soldier. I don't know that we even got his name, but random soldier, make a choice, better yourself, learn something. And that's his whole line, and saves this guy. And so we can redeem that. And that's a good thing. Now he takes that to an extreme that we have to reject. But God has given us different properties, and like just thinking in medicine, God's given us different properties that when used together can alleviate, prevent, and treat issues. And so if we as rational beings, as the book of Isaiah calls us, if we as rational beings actually ration and use logic and these tools to better ourselves that God has given us, then we can in fact make choices that will be for the benefit of not just ourselves, but humanity as a whole. That's something we can redeem.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. Yeah, and I think, in terms of the reject, I'll throw another one out there that we saw this a lot with the Kansas City mob in season 1. But in this case, we see a character who is becoming part of the resistance. Welcome to the fight. They tell Isaac when he joins them. And he joins them through tremendous act of brutality and violence. But the thought then is, oh, well, maybe he's on the side of freedom at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And then the very next time that we see him, he is executing pretty
Yeah.
brutal torture. And so I think what we see here is that it's very easy for the oppressed to become the oppressor when the tables turn, if you will, when the turntables.
When the turntables turn.
Yeah. And so I think that it's that's certainly something to reject, this notion that because someone is a victim, that they are therefore virtuous as a result of that and incapable of then becoming the victimizer.
Yep.
We talked about that some in our X-Men episodes. It's a really good example of that as well.
It goes back to our conversations previously within the past 3 episodes of they have no basis of morality to stand on. So isn't it interesting? You've got this guy who's joining a fight. He's, we presume, joining the fight, at least the way they set it up, because the way they set it up, that whole truck is filled with guys who they set up to be like pigs, essentially. Like they're awful, awful people, and they're part of the problem. And he takes care of them, and welcome to the fight. So it seems like he has a sense of morality, but without morality being grounded in something eternal, something outside of us, dare I say, from God, without that morality being based in God and what He says is good, you ultimately see individuals who are just justifying themselves for making their own morality. And that's what we see with the character.
Well, and especially that we're living in the Wild West, right? I mean, not just because they're riding around on horses and whatnot, but because there's no law at this point, right? This is the time of the judges, if you will, in terms of what's happening in the world. And if Miles were here, he'd go down the judge's rabbit trail, but which is fair. But in this case, I think really what we're seeing is that there's no leaders. But this actually dovetails really well with my sort of big takeaway from this episode, which is that creation order is going to shine through in all of that. And so what is creation order? Basically, this is just a way to describe, another term for it is the general revelation, the way that God reveals Himself to us through the things that He's made, but not just reveals Himself. He reveals who we are through the way that we are made. Essentially, that when we look at reality, it reveals things to us about our intention, what we are built for. Our identity is actually revealed to us in the way that we are designed. It's not endlessly negotiable. It's something that we can always rebuild and re-identify. And so following up on your reject point from earlier, this episode I thought actually did reveal some pretty interesting angles on an issue that, can get contentious, which is, the LGBT issue, the LGBT revolution. And this episode really reminds us just how recent that is. And so for younger viewers, it might seem like this has always been there, because for the majority of your life, there's been so much discussion on this. But for those of us who have been around a bit longer, that's not so much. I mean, in this case, we see Ellie and Dina don't even recognize the significance of the rainbow flags, which given their relationship is interesting. Yeah. So this, the pride flags and the rainbows that they see in Seattle, the rainbow is a symbol of God's judgment as well as His mercy, right? So this was given in Genesis 9 following the flood, but it's become co-opted by the sexual revolution, especially in particular the LGBTQ angle of that revolution. People that reject God's design for relationships. There's no small amount of irony involved in that co-opting of that symbol, but they don't even recognize it. This reminds us that in 2003, this was a symbol that had not made it into the cultural memory and consciousness of everyone in the U.S. It was pretty widespread in 2003, but not enough that they would have remembered it when the world fell apart. Additionally, the transgender revolution, that certainly would not have been known in 2003 in that universe. This was something that, despite that, is alluded to in this episode, like you mentioned earlier, Jam, with this, this whole "I'm going to be a dad" line. When Dina reveals she's pregnant, it is funny because they both don't recognize 2003 sort of redefined sexual morality. Yeah. But they also clumsily fall in line with the 2025 redefinition of the family. It was just like a big inconsistency there. Did that stand out to you?
Yeah, and I was just talking to a friend of mine. She's a sister that goes to church with me, but then also helps. She's our librarian at the school, and I brought up Hamilton. There's the part in Hamilton where they're singing. Oh, I'm blanking on it now. Where they're quoting the Declaration of
We know
Independence.
these truths to be
Yeah, be
self-evident that
self-evident
all
that
men are
all men are created
created equal.
equal, and then uh, have them remember that. Have them remember
Include
women in the
women.
sequel,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's
Yeah. Yeah.
like we're literally rewriting history, which is ironic in that song because they say history is happening or it's in the making or
Yeah.
something. So it's ironic because it's like you're rewriting history where you would not have had women arguing that they are not equal with men in that context. Like historically speaking, you just wouldn't have that happening. That's the same with The Chosen. That's a hot topic right now, and even within The Chosen, like the very clear 2025 political ideologies are even seeping into that, where you're rewriting biblical narratives to fit an ideology. And so even with this, like, yeah, I picked up on that. Is like they don't know the flag that is supposed to be the symbol of their entire evolution, but they somehow know the ideology that she isn't or doesn't identify as a she and can be a he. How does that
Right.
work out? It's illogical.
It is. And when she says, I'm going to be a dad, I thought that's kind of a funny thing to say. Like that would be like, that could be a moment of levity. That could have been a laugh, but it was played very serious, which I thought was really interesting. Cause I mean, she could have said like, I'm going to be a dad. No, wait, like there could have been a moment there that was kind of down to earth and relatable about it, but it wasn't. But despite that, one thing that we say a lot on this podcast is, some version of image bearers are going to bear image, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we're created, we bear the image of God, and we can't help but reflect aspects of God's design in our lives. Sometimes it's called the creation order, like I mentioned earlier, the fact that God's design shows up even in a world that seeks to reject him. And ultimately, you can reject the creator, or try to at least, but you can't reject his creation, what is around us, what we are made of, the real world that we occupy. And so, one thing that we see that reflects this is that during the 5-year gap between season 1 and 2, we see that Ellie really leans into her sexual preferences and as a result becomes sort of increasingly masculine in terms of the way that she dresses, her clothes, her mannerisms, and has taken on the role of being Dina's protector, right? And sort of in place of Joel. And there's a place for that. But it does fit in with her kind of masculizing more in this season. Meanwhile, Dina maintains her femininity in a lot of ways. And so even in this show that rejects God's design for relationships, we see characters falling kind of back into those complementary aspects of male and female, even though it's a distortion of that.
Well,
there is a place for both of those.
That's normally how it works too. Even if you just think about our culture and you just take a analysis of our culture, you have a skewing of manhood and womanhood. But even within the skewing of manhood and womanhood, and you have the argument of it's a social construct, you still have those who are arguing it's a social construct falling in line with the very thing they're arguing is wrong, which is the social construct aspect of it. Which we have a reason for. Like you're bearing the image of God. In a relationship there should be a masculine and a feminine. That even within the conversation of the trans movement, that women present in certain ways and men present in other ways, and those are normal and those are good things that should be celebrated when done appropriately. That's interesting.
It is kind of odd because in a story that really deviates so much from a biblical sexual ethic, it just keeps shining back towards this. I mean, it's under the surface, but when you dig, you find it. And this is all referring back really to what we're told in the first chapter of the Bible, Genesis 1:31. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So not only do we bear God's image as being children of the Creator, we bear God's image as being men and as being women. And what's kind of interesting about this is that life imitates art, art imitates life, so on and so forth. But I just saw an article like yesterday in prepping for this episode where Bella Ramsey, so the actress who plays Ellie, who, by the way, identifies as non-binary, was recently defending the categories of the Emmys for male and female actor, best male performance, female performance. And she says, sue me, by the way, for calling her she, that it's important to have these distinctions, male and female, for recognizing women in the film industry. And I'm thinking, well, that's fascinating because you don't identify as a woman. She is torn, though, because she has these separate values and she's trying to justify them. She's torn between the issue, between that issue of women getting recognition and representing the non-binary actors, quote, non-binary actors and characters. And I thought this was a really interesting parallel to the current issue of biological males competing in women's sports, which is, a huge topic of discussion now, and we're not going to get into it at the moment. But the fact that Bella, the real life Ellie, is actually torn on this issue indicates she can't deny creation order either when she observes the world around her. And what's interesting, too, is that they said that even though she's non-binary, she's fine with people, quote, calling her as they see her, which I think is fascinating, right? She I guess, isn't offended by people saying she's a girl or a woman because she says, yeah, call me as you see me. I'm thinking,
it's
okay,
it's the way she presents, I guess. The entire movement is an interesting movement. I've got a great love for that community. I mean, the Lord's placed me in almost every single job except for now, where I'm working in a Christian school and pastoring. Every other community or every other job, I've been in direct contact, and I have a great love for that community. They are interesting because you do have that. You have them presenting in certain ways and identifying in certain ways. And what's interesting about Ellie and then Bella Ramsey, Ellie in the second game does not come off as masculine as she does in season 2 in the show. I mean, almost night and day. And maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm blind to the fact that she came off more masculine in the game, but she still seems feminine to me in all the ways she was feminine in the first game, which is why I was so shocked playing the second game and having an out of nowhere development that she was a lesbian. And I didn't play the DLC, and the DLC for the first game is what apparently hints at or clues you in on that. But even the way they're presenting Ellie in the show is very different. And so, I was thrown off by that. I mean, my wife and I quite literally just like paused and looked at each other like that. Why is that a thing in here?
In the first season?
No. In this season, when she says, I'm going to be a dad, like, we paused and said, why is that in here? Because you're absolutely right. Timeline doesn't match up. And what we have happening is pandering, essentially. You're rewriting your own history of this world. You're rewriting it to add in a agenda that panders to a particular group of people.
Right. I mean, and if we were to go based on, okay, let's say that they're in 2020, or excuse me, let's say they're in 2003 kind of sexual ethic fast forwarded through the apocalypse. Okay. Let's say that that's where they're at. They would essentially be, I would guess, where many people were about 10 years ago, which was that, a kid can have 2 moms or a kid can have 2 dads, which is not true, but it is at least in keeping with some of the claims of that community. Instead, what they're doing is they're jumping straight to 2025, which is that, I'm going to be a dad. And again, not a laugh. If that had been a moment of levity, it could have still accomplished their purposes.
Yeah.
And made slightly more sense. But it was it was odd. It definitely felt on the preachy side. But another
Rosaria,
thing, go ahead.
I was just going to say Rosaria Butterfield. She's a Christian. She's written a lot on this. I listened to her at a conference actually last year, and she was promoting her new book, which I'm blanking on the name, but she was essentially talking about how she was a women's studies professor at an extremely liberal college. She was in a lesbian relationship. She was a feminist through and through, and how essentially becoming a Christian, she came to an understanding of these things are wrong. But the way she talked, what came to mind when she was talking about it was essentially that the LGBTQ movement, you start with feminism and it greatly evolves. And it's not just you start with feminism. Of course, you have the LGBTQ ideology of same sex attraction, those kinds of things already. But feminism greatly pushes that along. And she essentially, the way she describes it, it makes me think of an evolutionary ideology where you start with feminism, which today's feminism is essentially just saying women are just men, but they're better. So it's like, in order to be a strong woman, do everything a man does, but always know you're better than a man. So it's really just don't be a woman, be a man. That's feminism today. But then you also have, and it's no wonder we've jumped to the ideology that we're in, where it's a man can be a woman or a woman could be a man. Well, you have over the course of however many years, you have this ideology evolving from just men and men are perfectly fine together to you can have two dads to then, well, what are dads even?
Yeah,
like,
right.
It's no wonder it's because it has a shifting or a unstable basis, right? It's a house built on sand. It's like you argue for one thing, but then that thing is not enough. We got to keep going and keep going. So it just continues to evolve and evolve and evolve, which I'd be curious to see where in 10 years from now, right now we're talking about the trans ideology and how that's panning out. Where is that trans ideology going to take us in 10 years?
Yeah. That's
Maranatha.
I was going to say that's a good question, and I something tells me just to be a slight optimist for a minute. Maybe they're optimists, as they said. I think we're going to circle back on some of this stuff. I got to be completely honest. I mean, I believe that God's going to bring us back. I mean, obviously, he gives people over to their indulgence, right? Yeah. He gives people over to their rejection of him. And so there's some of that, but I do think that it's not a completely hopeless cause, but who knows, right? I sure don't. But another thing is a quick aside, and this actually does parallel with that a little bit in terms of creation order shining through, is that Ellie is very protective of Dina once she finds out that she's pregnant. Mm-hmm. And that she loves her, right? And so there's this relationship and she's protective of someone she cares about, okay? But she's also protective of her because she's a mother. She's pregnant with a baby. She's not pregnant with a potential baby or a cluster of cells or even an extension of Dina's body. It's a baby.
Yeah.
A unique human being that deserves dignity, love, and protection. And once again, it is fascinating to see an ideology that generally corresponds, and I can't think of any exceptions that I'm aware of, corresponds with the pro-abortion side of things, that can't help but recognize the value of a human life. I mean, it was a remarkably pro-life moment. And again, this is where the redeem category becomes so important, right? Yeah. It was a remarkably pro-life moment kind of embedded within this rejection of sexual ethics. And so I mean, in a sense, I almost want to go back and change my ranking a little bit, just because it provides so much of this discussion. But I know that this discussion is going to continue into future episodes. So with that in mind, I'm curious, what themes did you pick up on?
Yeah, honestly, the best way I could describe what I was thinking watching the show is just the lengths that we will go. To simplify it, it's the lengths that we as sinful fallen human beings with sinful hearts will go to justify ourselves. You have Ellie and Dina who almost completely and totally justify their relationship over shared trauma bonding. They have trauma bonding. They have their own desires, and it's like it's the end of the world. Who cares, kind of thing. But then you also have Isaac, Jeffrey Wright's character, who justifies his killing of an entire truckload of soldiers by the means of them not being as well educated or not making the right choice. And after all, I mean, he justifies himself in the sense of, well, I saved one soldier who's different than the other soldiers. And then we just see how far his educated choice has taken him. And now he's torturing human beings. He's torturing the Scar. So a couple of verses that come to mind, of course, you have Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? We were getting into Romans 1 territory with your point, and that's where I was at too. Romans 1:28. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not be done. Or you think of Luke 18:9-14. He also told this parable to some who trusted themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. Two men went up into a temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, and even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I get. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you that this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. So thinking like we literally see that parable, that passage in Luke is Jesus giving a parable. We literally see that played out with Isaac. Isaac thinks of himself justified. He has a just action of killing the others, ultimately because of what this group he is joining will achieve or hopes to achieve. And you essentially have Isaac saying, I thank you that I am not like these other men. And he communicates that by killing those men, right? He has that whole speech in the truck with them. And I forget what Josh Peck was saying, but he was saying something, and then Isaac gets on to him, and of course you didn't think about that. You're not like that, and that kind of thing. And you can see remorse in Josh, like I didn't realize, sorry, Sarge, kind of thing. But he's already made up his mind. Isaac's already made up his mind. He's just in what he's about to do. He's about to kill these guys because he's not like them. Well, then he also sees that soldier, and he sees hints of himself in that soldier. And so it's like, that soldier's not like them either. So I thank you that this soldier's not. And now I'm going to give that soldier an option. So he justifies himself in killing them. And ultimately we see that where that's going to take him. Well, Dina and Ellie are doing the same thing. In this episode, they first find themselves justified in their relationship. Dina and Jesse aren't together anymore. So now, Ellie is not impeding on anything, and we see their relationship growing over the course of horseback conversations about bands. And then out of nowhere, it's like, I'm pregnant. Okay, and we can finally be together. They justify themselves in that. But they even justify themselves in the way that they take human life in this episode. If I'm remembering correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, they were completely and totally unprovoked when they started killing the people in this episode. Is that correct?
No. So they were they get stumbled upon, right? And so they find these bodies, and then the wolves show up, and then they're trying to get out. And so I would say it was self-defense ish, but they definitely didn't seem conflicted by it.
Yeah. Maybe that's a better way to think about it, because watching it, you don't see the wolves coming immediately, like respond in hostility, even if it was the wolves or not the wolves that hung the men up. Like, we're led to believe that because from their point of view, it seems that way, right? Hung the scars up. But even still, it's like they didn't really start shooting and attacking till you have Dina and Ellie kind of fighting their way. I don't know. That whole situation, even if they were provoked in it, you see Ellie having no remorse whatsoever, stabbing that guy in the neck. You see, she has no remorse whatsoever of like locking those soldiers out and not trying to partner. You would think the living would want to like partner with the living to survive, and they feel completely and totally justified in a every man for themselves kind of approach. But ultimately, I think the biggest thing you see from this episode that you can take away is the fact that we are all sinners, that we will all constantly try to justify our own actions, regardless of what they are. We are constantly pretending that we are no worse than that guy, right? Ellie and Dina do that with the wolves. In the train scene, well, we aren't as bad as the wolves are, so we'll let the wolves get killed. We're not even going to try to help them. And there was, here's a popcorn gripe I have. Why didn't they just crawl back in the tunnel that they came out of that was right behind them? Why did they move forward where all of the
that's
all
fair.
of the undead were? They should have just crawled back through the tunnel.
Yeah, makes sense.
But what we see from this is essentially that, like, we are depraved. I wrote a song for Context, the band I'm in, called Common Grace. And essentially, the song is a presuppositional apologetic, which is essentially arguing, I am presupposing that everyone knows the truth about God, but they suppress it on the unrighteousness. Because the Apostle Paul presupposes this. He actually says this is the case, and this is why they are the way they are. And so the unbelieving world, they know the truth about God, and they suppress it in their unrighteousness. And essentially, the lengths that they will go to justify themselves is the same thing we do. They suppress the truth about God. And so this self-justification is what I would equate in the song to turning on a light, but saying it's off. That's a line in the song. It's like, you turn on a light, but you say that it's off. Well, just because you say that the light is off, it doesn't actually mean that the light is off. And you can liken this in the episode to, like, you can say that you're justified in your actions, but it doesn't always mean that you are. Isaac thinks in his own mind, because he is king and judge of his own world, he thinks, I'm completely justified in killing this whole truckload of soldiers. And then we see later, I'm completely justified in forcing this man to stick out his hand and get his hand burned with a hot skillet. Like, you see that's the case. You see that's the case with Dina and Ellie. I'm completely justified to give over to any of my desires, because who's to tell me I'm wrong? That's a whole movement right now. Who's to tell me I'm wrong? But then also, I'm completely justified in leaving human beings to get slaughtered for no reason. I'm completely justified in furthering my own attempt for revenge and vengeance. They have just done nothing but that. And so it's the same thing. Yeah. They're essentially saying, well, the light is turned on, but it's actually off. They're blinding themselves. They're being willfully ignorant is what we're seeing. Yeah. Any thoughts on all that? That's a lot there, man.
You're good. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think additionally, in an effort to kind of explain or to think through why it is that they're so callous about killing them. At one point they ask, so what if we come across wolves that aren't them? And they kind of look at each other and they don't say anything, but there's a knowing look, which is basically like, do what you got to do, which is definitely an us versus them mentality. It's a pretty stark example of it. What they don't know is that, or what they don't seem to respond to, is the fact that Abby's group was going rogue. They weren't acting as part of the wolves when they did that. They went on like a vacation and did this, killing of Joel, and then went back. So for all they know, the wolves are doing okay work. I mean, they overthrew Fedra. That's got to be something, right? But then again, Ellie's been through Kansas City, and she knows that just because a mob overthrows a totalitarian force doesn't make them any less totalitarian. So yeah,
well, that's the problem with the times of Judges, man. That's where they're at. That's exactly it.
Yeah. And so I agree that there's definitely a judgment that is passed. I mean, and even this is a great line from Isaac where he's talking to, you killed a kid, well, you kill our kids. Well, yeah, but your kids shoot at us. And you violated the truth. Well, you violated the truth. And it was just this back and forth thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, if that isn't very telling for our times and for, like you said, the times of the judges and just human experience as a whole. I don't know what it is that you can always find reasons to justify what you're doing because the other guy did the same thing. So therefore it's okay for you to do it. It's not okay for them to do it, but it's okay for you to do the exact same thing in a different context. I mean, it really is a real indicator of why it is that we need an objective standard. If it's wrong for them to do it, it's wrong for you to do it. Wrong
for you too. Yeah.
It doesn't matter that your enemy did it and got away with it. Therefore, it's okay for you to do it. You know, the whole whataboutism of our cultural moment, which is that, well, you didn't care when so-and-so did the thing that you're complaining about. So you're literally doing the exact same thing and making that argument, which is saying that it's justified when so-and-so does it, but not when that person does it.
Right.
Do better, basically, is my main point with that, is that we should all be appealing to an objective standard and call a spade, basically.
Yep.
So anyway, there's so much more we could discuss. Apparently, maybe not the most diluted episode. If it prompts all this discussion, I love it.
Pleasantly surprised.
There you go. And so the credits are going to roll on this episode, just like it did on the show. But again, don't forget to like and share, subscribe, and consider supporting us on Patreon, rating and reviews, all of that good stuff.
And until next time, keep engaging movies and media from a godly perspective. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.
And no matter what, you keep finding something to fight for. Thanks for watching this episode of Popcorn Theology. For more content, subscribe on YouTube. Follow and interact on social media to help broaden the conversation. Check out our archive of past episodes at popcorntheology.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, and consider becoming a patron saint by supporting us on Patreon, which lets you interact, influence, and enjoy exclusive bonus content.